Funding for this edition of Think Tank with Steve Adubato has been provided by the Turrell Fund, supporting Reimagine Childcare, New Jersey Sharing Network, Holy Name, This Place is Different, the New Jersey Education Association, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, here when you need us most, now and always. The Russell Berrie Foundation, making a difference. Johnson & Johnson, the FIDELCO Group, and by Caldwell University. Promotional support provided by Meadowlands Chamber, building connections, driving business growth. And by ROINJ, informing and connecting businesses in New Jersey.
Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. This is News 12 Plus, a very special edition of Think Tank here on News 12 Plus, and we welcome our good friend Ira Robbins, CEO of Valley National Bank. Ira, by the way, the reason I'm obsessed with Valley, not only because we do a leadership academy there that I've been doing for about 4 years. I started with Ira and his team, and they've been a longtime sponsor of what we're doing in terms of profiling nonprofits making a difference. Ira, and I've worked with Ira for years. There's a question here, trust me. Ira, set up what people are about to see. We did an interview with you all about the relationship between customers and their banks and technology. Why is that conversation so important?
The world's evolving, the world's changing. Customers expect and should expect different types of experiences, different types of problem solutions coming from their banks. And it's important that banks now think about themselves very differently. How do they interact with customers differently? At Valley, there's a significant focus on making sure we're driving what that change looks like and not being reactive to what that change looks like. And for me as a CEO, it's a wonderful opportunity to lead an organization into the future.
How hard is it to stand out and quote unquote differentiate yourself from countless other banks?
A lot easier today than what it was when I first started. I think the ability to really differentiate is a function of the people that we bring into the organization and how we empower those individuals, support those individuals, and trust those individuals to really drive a differentiated experience.
Ira, I talked about the Valley Leadership Academy. We work with Yvonne and Jake and your great HR team. And long story short, the reason I'm mentioning this is because I'm obsessed with leadership development. I know you are as well. Why can't people just say, we're going to hire the best people? And like the Yankees, we always think I'm a Yankee fan. I say we like I'm on the team. You hire the best people. You go out and you get the best people, and that's how you succeed. Not exactly, sir, right?
I'm not sure just hiring the best people in isolation makes any kind of sense, right? There's so many moving parts in today's world, and how do you integrate and work together as a team from a collaborative perspective? Project management is very different than what it was before. Organizational hierarchy is very different than what it was before. And the ability to coalesce, work as a team, iterate as we move forward, as opposed to thinking about a traditional project mindset, is much more important than just having the right talent. So talent's important. Absolutely need to bring in wonderful people into the organization, but the ability to collectively collaborate and move forward and have that passion drive the excitement, the ability to want to have a purpose and a belonging is just as critical.
Not to mention bringing in leaders and developing them who pivot, who evolve, who adapt, who innovate. And change is not something they accept, but rather they lead. You get the final word, Ira.
I love it. The work that you do with us, tremendous. I'm excited about Valley's opportunities. I'm excited about a customer's opportunities. Banking environment's going to change, and Valley's going to be at the forefront.
Thanks, Ira.
Thanks, Steve.
This is Think Tank, News 12 Plus. Stay with us. Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. We kick off the program with our longtime friend, Ira Robbins, CEO of Valley Bank. Good to see you, Ira.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
So many things to talk about. Ira, let's jump into this. You have told me in offline and on-air conversations we had, you've also been on our Lessons in Leadership program to talk about your view of leadership. But you have said that the relationship between customers and banks and businesses overall have changed forever. What does that mean?
I think this is one of the benefits, to be honest with you, when we think about COVID. And customers, employees really have the ability to re-engage and reestablish relationships, which from a banking perspective, as well as other businesses, really creates that value proposition. As we think about serving our customers and what that customer experience model should really look like, it's how do we think about interactions, experiences that can be digitized versus those that should be person-to-person relationships. And I think that's the evolution that many companies are going down. We're really migrating down that path. And I think it's a benefit to both the customer and the company as well as we think about what are those high-touch experiences that we want to make sure we focus on.
So it's so interesting. One of the things I know about Valley, because I've been leading a leadership academy, a Valley Leadership Academy, coaching around management, communication, and leadership at Valley for several years now. And so much of the focus in my leadership work is around the ability to interpersonally connect with other people. Easier said than done. Ira, is it harder for particularly younger people, from your view, who would get recruited into the bank? Recruiting good people is hard enough as it is, to engage interpersonally because they're so obsessed with this?
Yeah, I think, they lose the value of what a relationship is. And, it's our responsibility, just like we teach them about many things from a development perspective, personal career growth. Part of it is teaching about the value of a relationship. But one of the things we can do is make sure we focus on the right types of experiences that should be a relationship and understand that they're probably correct in many instances about certain types of interactions that should be digitized. And how do we make sure that we focus on digitizing the right ones and enhancing the experiences on the relationship components across the...
Ira, give me an example. I'm sorry for interrupting. Give me an example of something that definitely automation, technology, digitized communication, that's the way it goes. But in another case, you've got to be at least on the phone, if not face to face.
Yeah, I think, look, when you're looking to solve a problem or a bigger solution for someone, those are relationship type of conversations that people should have. And we do many things across our organization when it comes to balance transfers, when it comes to balance inquiries, changing addresses. These are experiences that really should be digitized, and we're wasting individuals' times, and candidly, we're probably creating a bad customer experience by looking to put these into a relationship type of model.
So, okay, so it's a balancing act. And it's interesting, I have not heard a corporate executive say that there's been a significant benefit from COVID in a long time. But the pivoting, the adapting, but also I know for Valley and for other banks, and I'm not saying this because Valley is one of our partners and we work with them, but a lot of banks have done this, but expanding your portfolio of services around payroll protection, PPP. That was a big deal. That wasn't part of the portfolio 4 years ago, 3 years ago, correct?
Not at all. I mean, that specific product definitely wasn't, but the concept of providing innovative solutions for our customers was something we always attempted to really do. But if you think about the PPP component, right, how much of that really was digitized versus how much needed to be a relationship? And if you look through the process and work stream of what that looked like, initially it was a relationship. How do you have a conversation with a customer to really understand what's important to him or her, what opportunities they have based on the new legislation and guidance that came out? But then what are the components of that process that could be digitized using DocuSign, using the ability to fund an account? And it was important for us to make sure that we were clear with our customers how to get an efficiency and an experience that was appropriate for them from a digitization perspective. It was just as important to make sure that we listened to them in the beginning, right? God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And when you think about that component of how we connect with our customers, making sure we listen is critical to the right types of conversations. And that's important for us to really look through the customer experience and really begin to identify what are those high touch points that we want our customers and our employees to really be connected on from a relationship perspective. So the onus is really on us, Steve.
And I want to make it clear that the CAUCUS Educational Corporation was a recipient of one of those loans/grants from the federal government, the PPP initiative, and we understood how complex that was. But all right, let me try this. The future, a huge question, not just the future of banking, but the future of technology and banking, change forever and moving forward at a rapid pace.
I was sitting there talking to our employees. We did a town hall the other day, and we were talking about just what's changed in the banking landscape. I mean, when I first started in banking, there was 12, 13,000 banks, charter banks across the entire country. Today, we're down to 5,000, 6,000 charter banks. And you could look at the industry and say it's an industry that's contracting. Really, it's not a real growth industry. But when you expand the horizon and look at it, there's more fintechs that have come into the industry today. And fintechs provide, traditional banking experiences, payments, delivery, solution.
Ira, sorry for interrupting. Define a fintech.
So yeah, it's a financial technology organization focused on investing and changing components of banking, right? So when you think about how you think about the payment verticals that we have across our organization, some of these different fintech companies have now come in and looked at just that component of it and tried to enhance and modernize what that traditionally looks like, and many types of payment verticals as well. So when you look at the fintechs that have now come into the industry, when you expand the horizon, this is the golden age of banking from my perspective, Steve. The
golden age, Ira?
Golden age. You have more capital flowing into the banking industry than we've ever had before. You have more talent flowing into the banking industry, people that want to work in the banking industry. So when we think about the value proposition and what opportunities we have as an organization, it's not just to change what the interaction looks like with our customers, but our industry is changing dramatically. And that is a blessing from my perspective. When I look at it as a CEO, how do we think about strategy, vision very differently than what we looked about before? And we have opportunity to really grasp that. We have opportunity to bring people into our organization that would have never, ever imagined coming into the banking space today. And when you bring wonderful people into the banking space, the creativity, the excitement that comes from that's amazing. And we're seeing real focus on ability to iterate and to change what the value proposition is of a bank today versus what it was 2-3 years ago. And Steve, I believe, honestly, the iteration is going to accelerate at an exponential pace that we have no ability to really comprehend. And how do we think about continuing to iterate as we move forward? Change in organizational structure, change in workflow. These are amazing opportunities from my mind that you would have never associated with the traditional bank before.
Ira, you took over as the leader of the bank at what age?
42.
One of the youngest CEOs around, not just in the state and the region, but the nation. And I should also disclose that Ira was a coaching client of mine many years ago. He was not the CEO. He was in the finance arena, and I got to know him very well. And we look forward to continuing to have important conversations about not just banking and the relationship between customers and their banks, but the impact of technology, but without losing the interpersonal side of this. Ira, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate the time.
You got it. That's Ira. I'm Steve. We'll be right back.
To watch more Think Tank with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
Steve Adubato here. We welcome back Rick Thigpen, Senior Vice President of Corporate Citizenship at PSEG. We're not talking energy here. We are talking military history. Rick has been doing a series of interviews with us on important figures, New Jersey-based and other leaders, part of a powering equity and social justice initiative powered by Rick and his colleagues. Today, we focus on General Norman Schwarzkopf. Born in Trenton, New Jersey, Rick?
Born in Trenton, New Jersey, the grandson of German immigrants.
We'll show some pictures. We'll show some pictures of the general. Track his history back to the state and his international implications as a military leader.
Well, he's the grandson of German immigrants, as you mentioned, a native of Great Trenton, New Jersey. Just reminded everybody how much of an impact New Jersey continues to have on American history. His father was the first superintendent of the state police, and in that capacity was the lead investigator in the infamous or famous Lindbergh
trial.
A Lindbergh trial, where his child was kidnapped, and it was taking place in the Flemington courthouse, I believe, in 1932.
That's right.
He was also a colonel in the United States Army, and he passed that on to his son, who we now know became a 4-star general, General Norman Schwarzkopf, who's famous to us all from Operation Desert Storm. At the time of the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, he was the commander of the United States Central Command, which involved that part of the world. And in that capacity, he coordinated all of the land operations for the over 250,000 U.S. troops involved in Operation Desert Storm. We all know that was a successful military operation. It earned him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. It earned him enormous popularity and fame, as successful military leaders frequently do, I can just mention a few, like General Eisenhower would be the most recent example of that. And he was a very successful leader. He made a case that a successful military leader needs character and strategy. And if you have to do without one, do without the strategy. And so he's someone we admire. They called him Stormin' Norman. He comes from New Jersey. He made a meaningful impact on our country's history in that he was a successful leader of the very big military operation. And he's someone we all know. He retired with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and yet another New Jerseyan who left their mark on the United States of America and arguably on the globe. And Steve, I will jump in and just mention two other names very quickly. One is General Ray Odierno from Rockaway, New Jersey, a four-star general and commander of the U.S. Army's 4th Infantry Division that captured Saddam Hussein at that time. He later became the Army Chief of Staff. Very successful gentleman from Rockaway. And then there's General Peter Pace from Teaneck, New Jersey, another four-star general who became chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, another one who had enormous impact on our country. So New Jersey continues to make enormous contributions, and we would be remiss to forget that young woman who is a former Navy pilot and federal prosecutor named Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill from the 11th Congressional District, who's in office today, a former military leader, now a member of Congress, and we shall see what the future has in store for that young lady. But she's enormously talented and capable of doing even more than she's doing today. And yet another example of how New Jersey and public service continues to have an impact on this country.
You know, again, part of this series, Powering Equity and Social Justice, Rick has joined us, and he did another full segment on the legacy, the impact of the great General Colin Powell, who was Secretary of State and a whole range of other important national titles. But one of the things with Rick that we've learned is that it's important to feature these people, because if we do not understand our history, if we do not understand who these people are, it's hard to put things in perspective today. So here's my question, Rick. You mentioned several military leaders who come out of New Jersey, not just General Schwarzkopf. Do you believe, and this is, I don't want this to be a trick question, but it is something I've been thinking about. Do you believe that military leadership then, as what it described, the leadership that everyone you just mentioned in this segment, their kind of military leadership, actually prepares people for public service outside of military leadership? Mikey Sherrill ran for Congress, is in Congress. We don't know what the future is going to be. But it's a long-winded way of asking, is military leadership in any way significantly different from leadership in other arenas that are not military-centric?
Well, military leadership certainly requires enormous discipline and a commitment to your country. Mikey Sherrill, for instance, was in the first graduating class in the Navy where women were eligible for combat. She's a little bit part of history. General Odierno was the grandson of Italian immigrants. General Pace was the son of Italian immigrants. So the military is also part of that great American melting pot where people, no matter where you come from, have a chance to prove yourself as an American, to make a great contribution in the form of public service. It does instill discipline. It instills commitment to your country. It instills a sense of paying attention to what's right and what's wrong. And so arguably, military training is one of the greatest ways to serve your country, and it can clearly prepare you for public service. We all know that some military leaders are not appropriate for public service, but many have shown that they are. And our country has a long line of military leaders, in high elected office. I use General Eisenhower, but we go back to General Washington, to General Andrew Jackson, to General William Henry Harrison, to General Zachary Taylor, and none of us could ever forget General Grant. So our country has a long history of military leaders serving in high elected office. It is a great way for people to serve their country. And many of these people that I've talked about today from New Jersey have an immigrant background. And I think it's just a fantastic story of why we are the greatest nation on this earth, Steve. So I just appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. I think the more we talk about it, the more we come together and recognize that, Steve, you come from a different background than I do. But that's why this is a great country, because we can work together to make America better by contributing in our respective fashions.
Absolutely right. And by the way, our great producers behind the scenes will show pictures of all these different people and try to bring their faces and some of their experiences to life. But we encourage you, as we put the names of those leaders up, to do your own research and find out more. Hey, Rick, cannot thank you enough for putting military leaders and military leadership in perspective, particularly those who come from Jersey, as we continue to engage in powering equity and social justice. Thank you, Rick.
Steve, let me close on one high note. I met General Powell at Seton Hall University when he came to speak, and so he's the only non-New Jerseyan we talked about, but he has been to New Jersey, and I had a great experience with him at Seton Hall. He was such a gentleman, a thoughtful man, a world leader. It was just remarkable to meet him.
Yeah, absolutely. And meeting General Powell for me when he was promoting America's Promise, talking about volunteerism, was an extraordinary opportunity as well. I was in awe of his presence. Hey, Rick, thank you so much, my friend.
Thanks, Steve, and thank you for powering equity and social justice.
Yeah, and let me finally just go as PSEG is not just a significant supporter of our work, but the work of NJPBS, a whole range of programs there as well. They support public broadcasting. Thank you, Rick.
Yes. Thank you, Steve.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
To watch more Think Tank with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
We are honored to be joined by State Assemblywoman Nancy Muñoz, who's the Deputy Minority Leader in the lower house of the Assembly and also a nurse by profession. Good to see you, Nancy.
Nice to see you too, Steve.
Put this in perspective for us. So many issues to talk about, but as we do this program at the end of 2021, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on, confusion at the State House around vaccine mandates. Because you're a public health expert, you've been in the business, you've been on the front lines, you volunteered your services the worst time of COVID. Should there be a vaccine mandate for every member of the state legislature, A, and B, should they show that they are vaccinated if they are?
Well, you know, it is a complex issue. I'm a believer in vaccines. Obviously, as you said, I'm vaccinated. I had all three, including the booster, but I've also am a vaccinator. I have volunteered as recently as last weekend, vaccinating kids as, the 5 to 11-year-old group. And so I'm very much pro-vaccine. Whether we should mandate that every legislator receive the vaccine, we don't mandate that anyplace else in the state. So if we don't mandate that anyplace else in the state, do we require our lawmakers to be vaccinated? The issue with vaccines right now is that the majority of people in New Jersey have been vaccinated. 70% to 80% have been vaccinated, have received at least the first dose. 65-year-olds and older, it's 95% have been vaccinated. So do we mandate a vaccine card? And there's some resistance because there are people who have natural immunity from having been infected with COVID. And, I've had this discussion with the testing companies, the pharmaceutical companies. When do we get to a point where we can do a test that says, you've had COVID, and how do we test for that natural immunity? So, again, I encourage everyone to be vaccinated. I think that we have the data to prove that it is safe and effective. We've given 400 million doses, and 7,000 people have died, which is a 0.002%. So we know it's safe.
But Assemblywoman, here's the other part of it. You have always been a reasonable, moderate Republican whose common sense matters. And frankly, that's not my point of view. Not everyone, people who know you know this, that science dictates and healthcare dictates and medicine dictates how you view things. For a significant number of Republicans in your party who believe that the vaccine is an overstep, the vaccine itself is an overstep, the pushing of the vaccine is an overstep, that President Trump, yes, he got the vaccine, he and his wife did, but they didn't really promote it, that government conspiracy, what do you say to your colleagues when this is a public health issue and not a political issue?
Oh, it's a very good point, because the majority of my colleagues have been vaccinated. For the colleagues who are opposed to the mandate to get into the State House, for them, it's an issue about they call it liberty. It's a really tough.
They called it tyranny. Some of your colleagues, the quotes are here. It's tyranny. It's against the democracy. How could they? That didn't help, Nancy, and that's not even partisan or political. That just doesn't help.
I agree that it doesn't help, and and I wouldn't make it all Republicans, and I think we have to be very careful about that.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, that's
vocal Republicans who are there.
And you know what? I look at this from the healthcare perspective as well, Steve. You know, if you look at the number of healthcare workers who are refusing to be vaccinated, it's not a Republican or Democratic issue.
No, it's not.
For me, it's an education issue. It's an issue of education, of understanding, number one, that we know from the data that it's safe. But number two, that this is not an experimental drug. The technology, and if we believe in science, the technology to develop this vaccine in a quicker manner than it's been done in the past has been in the works for decades. So we should be celebrating the fact that we have got this technology in a more quickly than we have in the past. Listen, my father had polio. My mother's first patient ever died of tetanus. I've taken care of patients who have had meningitis. So we know that vaccines are important and vaccines work, but we know that it's safe. It's not tyranny. The other issue is that I think the issue for some of my colleagues was that they were requiring a policy that didn't apply anywhere else. And for my colleagues who opposed it, they wanted to be able to vote in person. The speaker made it available to vote you could vote virtually. And two of my colleagues did vote virtually because they weren't able to get there. One tested positive for COVID.
We'll see how this is going to play out. And I don't want, again, it's not about just that issue, because again, we'll date ourselves as we've seen in 2022. But I want to ask you one thing really quickly on this. The role of Governor Murphy in leading in connection with COVID 2 years in. Please just succinctly describe what he's done well and what he hasn't.
Well, I think that, one of the things that people ask me what I heard on the campaign trail. One of the things I heard on the campaign trail is an overreach of the executive branch. And so I think what he's done at the beginning, and I was part of the conversation, was to get more volunteers, to get every county had volunteers. I'm part of the Union County Emergency Medical Corps volunteer group. I was testing in March. So one of the things that we did really well at the beginning is we enlisted volunteers, and we really organized to get effective testing and those processes were good. We put in executive orders, but I believe at this point, what we've not done as well is it's time for the legislature to have a voice. We have been kept out of the process. This is, we have the legislature and the executive branch together make our policies and make our legislation, and we have been kept out of that. That's what we've heard loud and clear. We should be part of the discussion.
Assemblyman, only I'm managing time real quick. Got a minute left. Real quick on childcare. We're doing a series called Reimagine Childcare, connecting it to the economy, the state economic revival, and in the state, childcare and economic vitality.
Well, I think we just passed a piece of legislation the second, an important piece of legislation to give child care credits to more people in the state. What we need to do with child care is make sure that we allow child care providers the ability to provide that child care. Most people, middle-class people, working-class people, want child care to be close to home with people that they know. They don't want to be regulated by the government. They want to be able to have that option to go to these providers who they know, and having a credit that goes directly to that family member to make those decisions. People make wise decisions when they can make them for themselves, and they can make economic decisions based on what's best for them, as opposed to allowing the government to say you can only go to certain child care providers.
Assemblywoman Nancy Muñoz is not just a nurse who's making a difference volunteering, but she's also the deputy minority leader in the state assembly. Thank you so much, Assemblywoman. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Adubato. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.
Think Tank with Steve Adubato has been a production of the CAUCUS Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by the Turrell Fund, supporting Reimagine Childcare, New Jersey Sharing Network, Holy Name, the New Jersey Education Association, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, the Russell Berrie Foundation, Johnson & Johnson, the FIDELCO Group, and by Caldwell University. Promotional support provided by Meadowlands Chamber and by ROINJ.
Hi, I'm Joe Roth. In New Jersey, there are nearly 4,000 residents in need of a life-saving organ transplant. and one person dies every 3 days waiting for this gift of life. One organ and tissue donor can save 8 lives and enhance the lives of over 75 people. You have the power to make a difference and give hope. For information or to become an organ and tissue donor, visit www.njsharingnetwork.org and be sure to talk with your family and friends about this life-saving decision.